Does the walker choose the path, or the path the walker? Hello everyone, and welcome to a cosplay walkthrough of the cosplay I am genuinely the most excited that I have ever made, which is Sabriel, the titular character of Garth's book Sabriel, and the rest of the Old Kingdom books. Now, Sabriel is probably one of the most important books in my life. When I was about 11, it was misshelved at my local library that I went to with my dad every weekend, and it was put into the children's books rather than young adult. And I found it, I thought it was interesting, and it blew my mind. It was, I think, my first serious introduction to fantasy, and oh boy, that kicked off a love that has lasted for well over 20 years at this point, and I still think it is an absolutely fantastic book. And I also love the wider world of the Old Kingdom series, but to me, Sabriel is like the seminal work. You know, Lyriel and Orson, the two direct sequels, are also like right up in there, and the rest are like all good and all enjoyable, but even if you consider Sabriel as a standalone, it is a fantastic book that I really love, and it meant the absolute world to me. Cosplaying Sabriel is something I have wanted to do for, well, as long as I knew what cosplay was, really. I just was always intimidated by the complexity of the make, especially the leatherwork and the bells, but it is something I've always wanted to do. In fact, James has been collecting bells for me for as long as we have been together, which is amazing, and which is why I also actually had a good set of bells for this cosplay. Especially in more recent years, as I gained weight, I was like, she's meant to be 18, she's meant to be this like kind of sickly looking schoolgirl. I am very much neither of those things. But this year, James and I went to Wellington Cosplay Photo Fest, and I decided to pull the plug and actually do this. Now, you may have noticed I haven't really put up any videos about Wellington Cosplay Photo Fest, and that's because we were sick, we were stressed, we were busy, it was just a bit of a mess the whole trip. Like, good experience, and without having done that, we wouldn't have signed up for Icon Photo Fest, which is in Tasmania, and we're going to that later on this year. But yeah, so there's not going to be a video about that, and unfortunately I was meant to shoot Sabriel with a couple of other photographers, including a collab with a Lyriel cosplayer, but that all fell through because we were sick. But I did get to do a photo shoot with James, so like, I got some photos, I'm happy. I did a lot of filming while I was making this cosplay because I intended to post a series of videos focusing in depth on each part of the build. That fell through because I ran out of time for finishing the cosplay, let alone filming anything about the cosplay. So I have a lot of footage of some things, not a lot of footage of other things, and it's all a bit of a mess. So this is me, well after the fact, giving you a run through. I do also want to point out that whilst I gave her my absolute best shot, time, budget, and also, look, let's be honest, my current physical appearance were roadblocks to making this cosplay as perfect as I wanted. Like, I really want her to be perfect, and she's not. I think she's good, and given my skill level and the complexity of the build, I think I did a fantastic job, but she is definitely due for some improvements already after just one wear. But I'm also okay with that. I really want her to be a forever cosplay that I just keep upgrading parts of, so she's always part of my wardrobe. She's not just going to be like, wear it and then, oh, it doesn't fit anymore, get rid of it. No, she's going to be upgraded and changed forever, hopefully. In this video, I'm just going to run through all the parts of the costume and tell you a little bit about how I did it. I do not have any of the costume with me, which might make things a bit tricky, but we'll figure it out. And as a final point of my intro, I really need to shout out my husband James because he helped with this costume so much, and I feel like it's really cheapening what he did to call it helped. He made parts of this for me. His support and understanding and help all the way along made it possible. I could not have finished this without him at all. And like I said, he's been collecting me bells for like a decade, so just shout out to James. This one was a team effort, so thank you, my love. Oh gosh, I really am bad at little hand hearts. Anyway, he knows I love him. With this cosplay, There are some iconic bits and some sort of like generic fantasy bits. And let's start with the exciting bits, the iconic bits, and we will start with the surcoat. Anyone who has read these books knows about the surcoat. It is a deep dark blue dusted with tiny embroidered silver keys. It's meant to have swallow-tailed sleeves and a split skirt, and other than that, it's not really described too much, so it is really a piece where you can have a bit of fun, make it your own. Did I do that? No, I made something incredibly basic. We have a mock-up! Isn't she pretty? No. The answer to that is no, but I gotta do a quick try-on.
2 very boring minutes later.
Just wondering, I think I need to bring the shoulders in and the armhole a little bit. So let me grab my chalk. More like that, and there will be bulk around the waist, but then put on the sleeves. Alright, that's a bit weird, but yeah. Given that I ran with the basic variation and I didn't worry about having it particularly fitted across the chest or anything, this is basically a giant rectangle with a swooping neckline and some sleeves. Sleeves normally like a tube with a curve at the top. You know what, I think I'm going to turn the camera off while I figure this out. I'll let you know when I'm done. It took me a bit to get the sleeves right, but once I did, simple, done, easy, and it was time to move on to making the surcoat proper. For the surcoat proper, I bought some, I think it's called delusted satin or something like that, some polyester satin fabric in a nice dark blue, which is definitely shiny, has some shine, but it wasn't too shiny, like cheap dance satin. It was the decent stuff. So cut it out, sewed it together, and then I actually left it for a bit until later in the project, but you get it all together. Once it was made, the next step was adding the keys. I didn't film this, but I had brought a silver fabric paint marker, and as you can see, it didn't turn out well. It's pretty terrible. So I'm going to try using white acrylic paint, because I'm touching up these shoes for another cosplay, so I've already got the white paint out. So I'm just going to give a shot to just painting a key and see how acrylic paint works at all. Like, okay, the key itself is terrible. I need a different brush. I think I need I'm wondering if I should even just do this with like a toothpick or something. Hang on. Let me switch hands and see what doing it with. Can I do this? No. Okay, can't test it while holding the phone. But anyway, yes, that works like a million times better than that. Once that dries, I might actually try going over it with the fabric pen or something. We do have silver paint, I just don't have it on me at the moment, and I figured white, because I might even do a white base and go over it in silver. Obviously, need to practice my key shape and get the right brush for it, but like I'm okay with that, because for scale, like there's my finger. It's not even as long as my first two finger joints, and I like that because the surcoat is described as being dusted with tiny silver keys. To me, dusted means that there's not heaps of them, and tiny means tiny. Like, I didn't want to do big keys, so like doing those, like spaced out by like, you know, probably do the next one like here, or something like that kind of spacing, or potentially even further apart, I think will give quite a striking visual effect while not looking too cluttered. And you know, might end up doing them diagonal or something. Actually, I probably will, because that'll be a bit more forgiving of my mistakes, and there will inevitably be mistakes. For the keys, I tested a few options, but in the end settled on making myself a little stamp, and I stamped the key pattern on. So, excuse the phone footage, but on suggestion of my husband, without whom this cosplay would barely be happening, instead of painting my keys onto the surcoat, I am going to make a stamp. This is just an eraser, a scalpel, and some sketches. He also suggested, why don't you try one with a square rather than a round at the head? So what I've done is I've drawn the key on one side of this eraser, and on the other side I have sketched out a square one. And basically once I've got those carved out, so basically I'm going to carve away everything that is not the keys, I'll test them both on some fabric and see what I think. So yeah, that's where we're at with the keys, and like, even though it's a bit fiddly making the stamp, it's going to be so much better in the long run. This technique worked, and it worked pretty well. The drawbacks were my key stamp was pretty crappy. I mean, it looked like a key, but I did not have the time, the fine motor skills to do anything better. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. I probably would use that technique again, but with a much better stamp. Then, with the stamping all done, I needed to add some trim. I decided to go with just silver binding around the neckline, the sleeve edges, sleeve hems, whatever, and around the hem. Now, because I was on a very limited budget, I made the bad choice of using just silver ribbon for most of it, and it does not look good. I am so grateful that it was a very, very windy day when we shot, so it's less obvious. I did use proper bias binding for the neckline, which is about 1,000,000 times better than the ribbon, so just memo to future me and anyone watching, don't use ribbon, or if you do, make sure you have enough time to like properly iron it and pin it and everything. I was just whacking it through the sewing machine, and that was not a good decision. So yeah, the surcoat I am not really happy with. I mean, it did the job, it's very distinctive, you can tell who I'm meant to be, which is one of the most important parts of cosplay, but I'm not really happy with it. That is definitely going to be remade, and it's going to be one of the first things I remake. The other most iconic feature of this cosplay is, of course, the bells. The 7 bells of a necromancer that a person uses to lay the dead to rest. As you can see, the bells are already well started, thanks to my husband James. So he has been collecting bells for me for almost our entire relationship. And then when I decided to do this cosplay, he was wonderful for me and started switching handles around. So like this bell here, you can see there's like a washer there. This one, the handle had cracked and he had to fix it up with foam clay for me. And he's just primed all of them except for this one. Now this one, he actually found at an op shop really recently, like after we'd actually started prepping it. So this one, I need to change out this crystal bead for just a wooden bead, prime it, and then it'll be ready for painting. Now there are a few imperfections with these bells, like this one, let me change the angle. The actual bell is bigger, but I figured that given that during the photo shoot, the bit that you're gonna see all the time is all the handles. I preferred to have the handles in a proper size order. As you can see here, that's a really good size order. So, hence the problems with sizing effectively, which I'm not 100% a fan of. Oh, and like, you know, you can even see these two. It's like, this one is a taller bell, this one is shorter, even though it's wider. So, this is definitely something that I am going to improve on in future, but, you know, this is going to be absolutely great for the Wellington Cosplay Photo Fest, and I really appreciate James doing all the handle switching, doing all the priming for me. It's really a great start. James also painted them all silver for me, handles included. I was planning on painting the handles to look mahogany, but in the end, didn't have time. They did look good being all silver, and I actually reckon that ended up being a good choice. I mean, the part of me that's really canon compliant is like, oh no! But no, I think this was absolutely the best choice, so, you know, thank you, James. They look fantastic, and I love having a proper set of graduated bells. However, the bells themselves, that rhymed, I didn't mean for that to rhyme, the bells themselves was the easy part. The hard part was the bell bandolier. Each of my bandolier pouches are a single piece of leather that is wrapped around and then a flap from the back coming over and fastening down here. It's kind of hard to explain. Hopefully I have some footage of me in the past explaining it better. picture this on the bandolier. So there's a belt going along the back. If fully opened, this is effectively like a semicircle of fabric. The bell goes in there. The bell goes in there, and then the sides flap up. Sorry, give me one sec. The sides flap up. The sides flap up, so it's kind of like an ice cream cone, a swaddled baby, I don't know. So at the back, I've drawn a line where the back would be, so that would just be riveted onto the belt. Now, we've got a couple of options here of what we could do. We could have a sort of a toggle at that point, and then like a toggle on the base plate and a hole on the top piece of leather, or we could have a strap going across the top piece onto a buckle on the bottom piece. That would be better looking. I think the toggles are going to be a heck of a lot quicker and easier to make, so probably going to go with that. I think James said he had like tall rivets, which will look kind of nice. And then for the top, we have a circle. So that, it's very hard to demonstrate one-handed. Let's put the bell onto it. So the top will just effectively be connected at the back, again riveted onto the base, and then we'll just flap over the top. Oh jeez, it's all falling apart. But effectively, so you have the top, you have the little weird triangle bit. So much easier to demonstrate this without the bell actually being in there. And then, so what happens here is the top will be, coming over the top of the bell like that, and it will have a little strap coming down to connect to the toggle. So basically, when you're opening the pouch, you flip 2 bits off the toggle, or just one, because what we'd probably do is you'd actually but you'd probably attach it, you'd fold this side in, attach the top, fold this side in for a little more security. But that also means that, in a sense, this is the only bit that's holding the bell in place. So once you've taken that bit off, the bell can just slip out the bottom. So like, yoink. Actually, see, talking this through is good, because it might just be better to make that a permanent attachment, but that also might be awkward to make. Gonna have to talk to James, but that's the thinking so far. Once I figured out the pattern that I wanted to do, the shape that I wanted to do, the rest of the leather work was fairly straightforward, just very time consuming. Fortunately, James has done a bunch of leather working before. Insert some imagery of his previous leather working. So we did have all the tools and actual leather, so that wasn't really a problem. But obviously leather is harder to work with than fabric, and stiff and difficult. But no, it is what it is. James was also super wonderful, and he did all the leather treatment on these for me, as well as helping me with a lot of the cutting and joining and everything. So once again, a husband who helps cosplay really means you can do cosplays that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do on your own, so woohoo, lucky me. I feel so terrible, because it's like I'm doing a video and anyone, if you leave a nice comment about the craftsmanship of any of these things, please know that I will be passing it directly on to James, because it ain't me, it's him. Anyway, I am grateful, super grateful. So yeah, all the pouches were made and assembled, and that was fine. Lots of fiddling, because with most of this stuff I didn't have time, and I don't have the brain for being too logical about things. I kind of have to just wing it. I can't pre-plan. I'm really bad at it. So they're rough and ready. They're not perfect. And also, because of running out of time, in the end I just cut, or I say James probably did, I don't remember honestly. We just cut slits on the back of each pouch and threaded them onto a belt. Not perfect, but they hung on my chest, and ultimately, I like how these turned out a lot better than the Surcoat. I think they actually look pretty darn cool. Because they were just slung on a belt, it was a bit awkward with weight, and they did all want to just sort of hang forward, so, not the greatest, but pretty solid. And this is a piece that, other than attaching them to an actual properly shaped and sized bandolier that'll sit on my body better, like might even end up, rather than having it just going from one shoulder to one hip, might put a supplementary strap over the other shoulder. Who knows, whatever, figure that out. But really quite happy with how these turned out. Next, the sword. Once again, the sword is full credit James. Absolutely full credit James. He found this wooden sword for me online, he bought it, he painted it, and had to like sand it and prep it before painting it. He attached the emerald gem and wire wrapped that on with actual genuine silver wire, which is like, oh. Though I did realise afterwards, I was going off sword descriptions off memory, and I was describing one of the swords out of L'Oreal, which had a wire-bound green gem, and I'm like, whoopsie! But he did such a fantastic job, I wasn't going to change it, because it looked really good, and no, I mean, the sword is something that will be remade for future versions of her cosplay, because, you know how I said I'm really bad at thinking things through? Did I check if my sword would fit in my luggage before we did the sword? No. So we were doing some frantic packing the night before going off, and then I discovered that the sword didn't fit in the suitcase. So I chopped it in half. Then we packed some super glue and we glued it back together, and again I say we, and it was actually James because he's much better at doing things than I am, and I did a really crap job of sawing it in half, and oh well. Does kind of make me glad that the only photographer I worked with was James, because I can retouch that. Oh, I mean, any photographer can retouch that. Some photographers prefer to leave the cosplay as it is in person, which is a completely valid approach, but I personally like being able to control fixing things in post, which I did. Because, spoiler alert, I also completely forgot to put the charter mark on my forehead when we were shooting. I just didn't even remember it till after the shoot, so she gonna need some work. But anyway, other than me ballsing up and having to cut it in half, the sword was pretty damn good, and I'm really grateful to James for making the sword happen. So you may have noticed a bit of a running theme here, which is James does the hard bits of this cosplay, which is pretty accurate, to be honest. Because the next thing, which is a simple thing, which is just a pair of brown pants, he found for me at an op shop. I wasn't even there. He just came home and he's like, here, I've got some pants. You got a couple of options, those are the ones that fit the best. They're just like regular work pants or something. Anyway, not a perfect pair of pants, like they're not really very fantasy-ish, and it'd be nice to make something more fantasy-ish, but they absolutely did the job. So once again, thanks James. And that brings me to the boots. The boots, which are also from James, because he bought them for himself from an op shop, and then he bought me some different boots to use for this cosplay, but his ended up being better, and so we switched boots. And they're a bit too big for me because they are like men's work boots, but they are actual leather. And then he went ahead and did a test weathering on one of them, and it looked fabulous, so I weathered up the other one. And so once again, yeah, lots of hard work done by not me. And while we're talking about sort of the simple things, I will talk about two things that this costume is lacking, which is A, I do not have an undershirt of any kind. We do have a couple of fantasy shirts that I could have worn. They were both a bit small for me, so I just ended up going, well, you're not really going to see anything other than maybe a bit of collar, maybe a bit of cuff, so who cares? Which was a good decision. And then the other thing is I did not end up doing the helmet and turban. I really want to at some point, because I really want to lean into the sort of 1920s schoolgirl Sabriel, like, and have like a little fashionable bob cut, which she's described as having, and then have that aesthetic transposed into the fantasy world. I think will be really good, but not this time. Because something I also did for this cosplay to make my life a heck of a lot easier is I actually just dyed my hair black. It was possible, so I did it. I thought I had a wig, but I didn't. The black wigs we did have available would have required way too much work to make them even somewhat passable, so I was just like, yep, screw it, just gonna dye my hair black, which is why this year my hair's been a little bit darker than usual. It's mostly come out, but it's still a darker brown than it naturally is, but yeah, whatevs. And then, last piece to talk about is the armor. Now this is a piece that I'm actually really proud of because I did this one myself, and I think it turned out pretty darn well. So she's meant to be wearing a coat of what is called Gethra. It's a ceramic sort of scale mail sort of thing with tiny overlapping plates. Now, I was originally planning on making effectively faux scale mail out of foam, which would look good, but time and effort are a little scarce on the ground at the moment. So I found this fabric, well actually James found this fabric for me. We were browsing the Spotlight website and he's like, oh, what about that one? And I hadn't even thought of it. So this is from Spotlight, the Australian, chain fabric store. And I'm going to see what weathering does to it, because if you sort of look at it close, it's very silver, it's very reflective, it looks very, well, like what it is, which is some shitty, shiny, synthetic. But I'm going to see if adding some black around the edges can make it look a little more genuinely metallic. This won't be hugely visible, like there'll be a bit around my wrists, a bit in the chest area because the surcoat's a little low cut, and a little bit sort of at the sides. I've got the surcoat split at the sides, and so you'll see this around my hips as well, but it's not a huge... like if there wasn't the surcoat and you would just see the whole suit of armor, coat of armor, I'd do something better, but I think this will do the job, so I'm going to give it a shot weathering it with some black paint and see how we go. Because this fabric was expensive and see earlier comments about being on a budget, I didn't end up making a full suit of armor, Hauberk? I don't quite know how to pronounce that. The typical fate of somebody who reads a lot of novels and doesn't talk to people much is, there's lots of words I don't know how to say. Anyway, that thing. All I did was I made sleeves up to like here. I made the two skirt portions and I made a false collar. With all of those, I patterned them out in a mock-up and then made them in the actual scale fabric, and then I weathered the scale fabric. This took a heck of a long time, but I'm actually really pleased with the result. I think in terms of costume armor, and especially because so little of it is visible, this actually turned out really quite well. Now I know it doesn't look like much, but compare. Undone, done, undone. It does make a very big difference in realism. I edged all the pieces with some brown suede from my fabric stash, and I attached the collar to a blue, I think it was one of James's pajama shirts actually, a dark blue long-sleeved shirt. I had intended to attach the skirts and the sleeves to that piece as well, but in the end, the sleeves were so tight-fitting, I just wore them like fingerless gloves, and it was better for the skirts for me to be able to safety pin them onto that undershirt rather than have them permanently attached, just so I could adjust the placement and stuff like that. Then the last couple of little things, i.e. the belt and the, not scabbard, but sword holder. Paul James, wonderful James, thank you James, appreciate you making this cosplay possible / making this cosplay. And speaking of James, he also insisted on buying me like this cute little fake cat from eBay, and that is Mogget, and we took it along, and it was really nice to have a Mogget. Need to make him a little red collar if I ever use him again, which I probably will, because he's a little white cat, Mogget's a little white cat, and the sleeping is relevant for the later books, but no spoilers. Anyway, well, that was kind of a spoiler. Sorry, this book series has been around for like over 20 years. I'm not going to feel too bad about spoiling anything, but you should read it. If you haven't read it yet, go read Sabriel. Then if you like it, read the 2 sequels, and if you like them, read more of the other books, because just, yes. But anyway, that is my Sabriel cosplay and how I made her. It's a really weird cosplay to look back on, because on the one hand, holy crap, I did Sabriel, and thanks to James being a fantastic photographer, as well as fellow cosplay maker, thanks to James being a fantastic photographer, I have some really, really badass photos of her that I'm really, really happy about. Yet, on the other hand, she's kinda crappy. But, like I said, she's something I'm planning on upgrading, and like, even if I made a new surcoat and didn't change another damn thing, new surcoat and longer shoelaces on the boots so I could actually do them up all the way, she'd look heaps better. And then I could work on doing a new sword or something. Actually, I do need to do a new sword because we threw that out. We took the gem and the wire off and threw it out. Actually, I think we just kept the hilt as is, but yeah. So, new sword, new surcoat, longer shoelaces, and she would look like a whole lot better without having to redo the whole thing. And that's why I'm really keen to zhuzh her up in the future, because I really enjoyed being Sabriel. There are a lot of fans of those books out there, but it's still not a very common cosplay. I mean, there's definitely been a bunch of people do it, but yeah. Anyway, gonna stop rambling, otherwise I could ramble forever about my favourite book. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed seeing how my Sabriel cosplay came together. If you have cosplayed anything from these books, please talk to me, because I want to see it. Like, I genuinely want to see it if you have done this. But yeah, gonna stop rambling. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, bye bye!